What's up, friends? Today we're going to talk about copyright and my thoughts on copyright. This is one of the public policy questions that I am most passionate about. And so I have a tendency to ramble. I'm going to try to keep this laser focused. So I'm going to start by stating my initial desire. And my desire is that the length of a copyright for a published work should be significantly shortened. How shortened would I like it to be? I would like it to revert to what it was prior to the Copyright Act of 1976, which would be 28 years was a possibility of extension to a 56-year total. And I would want the extension part of that to be under very specific circumstances that imply heavy continued use of the work of art in question. So let's give a little history first so that we are all on the same page in terms of copyright. So the Copyright Act of 1976 did a lot in terms of copyright. It established a lot of fair use practices, and it also looked into the length of a copyright, extended it from 28 years with a possibility of 56 years to 50 years after the death of the author. Later, that was extended to 70 years after the death of the author, and then 90 years after the death of the author. This is meaning that the author of the original work is no longer benefiting. Their children are no longer benefiting. Now their grandchildren are. Or that the companies that have bought the rights to their work are benefiting from their copyright into that extension of time. So that is what exists currently in our government, which is a ridiculous amount of time. To give an idea of the difference between that and medical patents last for 20 years after the creation of the new work. So what is this doing to the creative works landscape? It is significantly deterring progress, and is doing it through two mechanisms. Number one, people are afraid to iterate on art that is more than so many years in the past because they're afraid that they will get sued by companies that have bought these copyrights from people. And that is why they buy these copyrights, is so that they can sue new works of art that they feel are encroaching upon their copyright in any way, shape, or form. They're not using their copyrights to sell the current works. They're using these copyrights to sue people who are making new works of art. So there's a massive fear of encroaching upon that copyright. Second, because these works are not in the public domain, they're much less likely to be used in educational textbooks concerning that art. So you're less likely to see a painting in a textbook from the last 50, 70 years because it's not in the public domain, but you're more likely to see something from the 1800s. So people who are learning about painting art are less likely to learn more modern techniques because they can't get the textbooks that have those works. And that is creating a stifling to the progress of artistic endeavors, which we don't want as a society. That is just, it seems self-evident that we would want artistic endeavors as an entire public to continue to exist. Okay. Arguments that could be made against reducing the time of the term of copyright. People could say, oh, well, we want the authors to have this long-lasting work for their children, and we want, them to reap as much benefit as they can. They, after all, didn't make it. It's their baby. Tons of thoughts like that, right? Okay, what's the problem with that? Well, first off, a lot of copyrights aren't held by individuals. that a lot of the more profitable copyrights, they're held by corporations, right? So Disney is holding most of these copyrights. The old joke, Disney employs more lawyers than they do animators because they're just pursuing people to keep them from infringing on their copyrights. And they're very intense about this. And that is why it was such a big deal when Mickey Mouse was released to the public domain, of course, because that was one thing that Disney could no longer harp on people for as intensely. And that's not good. You don't want companies spending more money on lawyers protecting their rights than on creatives making their works and making new and original works, right? We kind of live in this era where companies are just trying to milk their old copyrights, and you would see a lot less of that in that type of era. Second, let's say that the individuals do own those copyrights. As you look at musician histories, you will notice this trend, and I noticed it when I started looking into musician histories, and that is that upon the death of the author of a work, there begins this fight almost instantly, because everyone's thinking, okay, where's the copyright going to go? Is it going to go to, their son, their daughter, their mother, their wife, their husband, whatever it be? And it starts tearing families apart every single time because they are so concerned about the rights of songs, of creative works of any kind. And so this estate becomes this breeding ground of conflict and hate. And we don't want that. We don't want to actively destroy bonds between people. When people argue for that, they're like, oh, I want to leave something for my children, and I want it to last a long time, like children, grandchildren. It becomes a thing of, well, you're not leaving anything to your loved ones except an air of destruction as they try to kill each other over these copyrighted works. I think we would see a lot more evolution in terms of art if that wasn't the case. I think hip hop, especially as a genre, would see massive improvements, and we would see a lot of cool new innovations in that genre because they are largely reliant on sampling as an art form, and sampling as an art form is significantly deterred by the current length of copyrights, and it becomes a thing where it's very intense and difficult to clear samples of any age by any artist to include these new and original hip-hop works in things like film and television. And it becomes a very corporate heavy involvement, and it starts to benefit the individual artists less and less because they can't get new exposure for their creative works. So those are just a few of my thoughts on copyright. I am very much in favor of a very short copyright term. I had it a little bit shorter before, and then my roommate actually said, well, we should have even shorter than that. And I was like, oh, how short? And he was like 28 years. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I looked into it and I was like, what? He's actually right. That is what the term should be. And I fully endorse that, and I'm actively for that term. So what can we do about this as a society? Well, we can raise awareness about it. We can raise awareness to the fact that, these companies are deterring the progression of art, and we can bring it up to legislators and try to make it an issue. There's a lot more issues in the artistic communities as well, but this is one that I feel would significantly increase progress of art. I have very many opinions that go very deep into this, and we won't get into those now, but I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on this and it made you want to do things. If that's the case, I appreciate if you like, comment, share, subscribe. I also have a Patreon if you want to support a new and rising artist, meaning myself. I make music. You can check out the music here. Thanks so much. Catch you on the flip.